How are Christians supposed to interact with the Sabbath? Hi everyone, this is R.A. Sweeney. Welcome to Ask and Response with R.A. Today I want to talk a lot about the Sabbath. It is a really misunderstood idea in how it plays out, both in the Jewish scriptures and as it plays out in Christianity. So I wanted to spend some time talking about what it is, what it isn't, how we interact with it, different things like that. So I figured a good place to start would be, just kind of looking at the command to Sabbath and kind of how it develops from there. So in Exodus, we have the 10 Commandments, and there is the command to Sabbath in there. And then there's actually a retelling of the 10 Commandments, and it's a little bit different. It's same basic ideas, but the wording's a little bit different because it's not, reading the 10 Commandments again, it's talking about the 10 Commandments again. So in Deuteronomy, you have a retelling of Deuteronomy means the second telling of the law, and that's exactly what it is, the second telling of the law. So you have the command to Sabbath there again. And like I said, the language gets changed a little bit between the two. There's some really interesting, like if you are looking at why the exact ideas communicated in each one get communicated in those areas, there's really cool connections, some symbolism, the number of things that go along with each. It's really interesting. If you want to dive in more, there's some really cool stuff with that. But probably the biggest thing is, or at least where I want to start, is the one passage says to remember it, to remember the Sabbath. And the word can just mean remember, but it's like an intentional, make sure, actively do things to make sure you don't forget. So mark it on the calendar is I'm doing something to make sure I don't forget. Setting a timer or a reminder on my phone. They were probably doing that, setting reminders on their iPhones. That's sarcastic. But it is this make sure that you are proactive about doing things so that you do not forget the Sabbath. And so that's in the one. In the other one, it talks more about guarding it. And the really super literal idea of the word is to build a hedge around it of thorny bushes. But it's this idea of guarding or protecting it and stewarding it, shepherding it, those sorts of things. And so that's kind of what the actual commands are. And then both of them have this weird, it does not, we've tried to make it translate into English, and I don't think it does. We usually say to keep it holy or to make it holy. The word is just, it's the word holy in Hebrew made into a verb. And so we say things like sanctify. But sanctify is a really weird word. We don't talk about we only talk about that in super religious context. I'm never what I'm gonna do today is some sanctification. It's not a common English word. It's only used in religious context, and I feel like that blurs the ideas. But it's this word holy turned into a verb. I actually translate it for my own notes as holify, because it's the action of holiness. And so you could say make it holy, you could say keep it it's hard to say exactly which of those translations we want to go with, but there's an idea of holiness to it, and holiness meaning setting it apart for a specific purpose. And so it should be unique, it should be unlike the rest, it should be this its own entity sort of deal. The other thing that's interesting between the two passages is one harkens back to the Genesis narrative and the 7 days of creation. It says God worked for 6 days and then he rested, which is not just he sat down in his lazy boy with a beer and watched TV all day. He wasn't watching football on Sundays. It is he stopped doing the work of creation. He'd gotten it in 6 days to where it was where he wanted to be, and then he changed tactics into I'm done with that, now I'm going to administer the creation that I've made. But he rested on the seventh day after working for 6 days is the idea. And so it harkens back to that. And the other passage, it focuses on remembering that you were slaves in Egypt and you didn't have the ability to to have your Sabbaths in Egypt. And so you know what it's like. Like, overworking will drive a man into the dust. And so, like, remember that. And that's why we Sabbath. And so that's interesting that those are different reasonings, different wordings, different things like that. And then if you read through, especially like in the prophets, like the Sabbath is huge. It's like, if you aren't going to keep my Sabbaths, you're in for it. Like, you're not my people if you're not going to keep my Sabbaths. And so it's pretty intense there. And it seems like there's a really, really big focus on the Sabbath. And so it seems like there's this huge importance, and certainly there was. But then we have done some weird things with that to say, like, okay, well, what God was saying is, if I don't work 7 days a week, then if you try to, then you're just showing you don't trust me, is kind of the implication of where we've taken that. Like, it's becoming a requirement, not a gift. It's become like you need to follow my pattern and not try to one up me, or like it's become really weird in like why we focus so much on like, God's gonna be mad if we don't like sit down and take a day off. At least in a lot of contexts. But regardless of the context, I feel like it's gotten kind of warped in what it's about. And then to make it worse, we have, in at least Christian contexts, a lot of churches have just moved the Sabbath to Sunday and said, well, now Sunday is the Sabbath, which is also a weird move that people have done, because nowhere in the Bible does it say, okay, no more Saturday Sabbaths, do it on Sunday. That's a weird thing that we've done there. And then some contexts haven't. So you've got like Messianic Jews still will keep Sabbath on Saturdays. Seventh-day Adventists will still do Saturdays. And so that's strange too. So let's kind of iron out some of what's going on with all of that. So Saturday is the traditional Sabbath. That never changed. So Sunday is not a replacement traditional Sabbath. In the early church, you see that they started to celebrate the Lord's Day instead of the Sabbath in certain contexts. Certain contexts celebrated both. Some focused on Sabbath still. Like, there's examples of both, and I don't see anywhere in the Bible that it's saying like, this is the right one, this is the wrong one. People did one, both, or the other in different contexts, and that was never criticized in the Bible. It seems fine that they did so. So the Sabbath is keeping the Old Testament Sabbath. The Lord's Day on Sunday is celebrating the resurrection, and they're two different things, not the same thing. You can do similar things on them, but they were never meant to, like, this is just going to shift on the calendar. That's not how the Bible lays it out. In fact, the Bible doesn't ever say specifically that everybody needs to Sabbath on the same day. It says work for 6 days, and then on your seventh day, Sabbath. And so that could get shifted. Like, there's nothing that it's not specified on the day of the week that it has to be this day. And there's a lot of people that speculate, like, that could have been observed by different people on different days, especially the Sabbath years, where you would work 6 years and then rest on the seventh, that could be done on different calendars. I think that creates some issues in either the weekly or the Sabbath year, especially once it gets to like Jubilee. But it's not a hard and fast, like, it has to be these days. That's not in the Bible. So I don't see any problem with someone saying, well, I will Sabbath on the Lord's Day. I will do both together, or I'll do the Lord's Day on the Sabbath. Paul even says, like, some people will treat this day as more important. Some people will treat that day as more important. Some people will just treat all days the same, meaning, like, I'm not going to have these special days that I am Sabbathing or Lord's Daying. And every day is going to be the same. And he says that's perfectly fine. The Spirit can lead people to do things in different ways, and that's great. So I think the big takeaway there is, like, why are we arguing about this? Because I see arguments about this all the time of like, should the Sabbath be on Saturday, on Sunday? Is one of them sinful? It's fine. The Spirit's going to lead different people in different ways. That's kind of the whole point of having the Spirit, is that we all are led to different ways of being a part of the body. So there's that. But then the question comes up of, if Sabbath's so important in the Old Testament, why are we not focused on it in the New Testament? Because all the steam comes out of the sails for keeping and observing and remembering and all the things that go along with Sabbath. Like it really loses a lot of that intensity that we see, especially in the prophets. And it seems weird when we think about Sabbath as like this mandatory, like do this to show that you trust me sort of thing. Like it's a weekly test of, are you going to trust me? And I think we've missed the point of the Sabbath. So when God created everything in Genesis in 6 days and then rested on the seventh, he wasn't just making things and like, well, I guess I'm done now. He was building a perfect universe. And when I say perfect, I don't mean done. I just mean it's set up perfectly. Like everything is ready to go and we're ready to get started. And there's this invitation for the seventh day rest. You see, Hebrews talks about this a lot, of coming into that rest, and we participate in that rest so that we can move into that part of God's work of, we're no longer creating, we're now reigning over creation. We're now administering creation. We're enjoying this perfectly created world and allowing it to grow and helping it grow and shape and all the things that go along with that. And Adam and Eve said, nah, we're not interested. And they went into exile by eating the fruit. And so they didn't enter into the seventh day rest. And that's, like I said, Hebrews gets into this a ton about entering into that rest. And so the Sabbath isn't this like, well, I rested, you better too. It is, I'm giving you 1 day a week that you get a taste of that seventh day to keep you excited about the seventh day. It's this weekly invitation to say, this is what things were supposed to be. This is where things are going. I'm bringing things back to the seventh day rest, and I want you to be a part of it, and I want you to experience it so that you'll be excited about it. And so it's all about, remembering that this is what I was meant for. That's what I'm remembering. It's not just like, make sure you don't forget. It's mark this as a day that you get to like experience what you were made for and what you'll one day get to be again. And it's like fostering this hope and this anticipation and this joy that like, this is what I will be a part of and where I'm going, and to keep you excited about it. And then the reference back to like, remember you were slaves in Egypt. Like you didn't get this. It's trying to point your eyes to, you don't live in the seventh day rest right now. Like you're in exile. You're still in spiritual Egypt, and I will rescue you out, because right where you are right now is not good. So I'm daily going to give you a taste of relief from that spiritual Egypt that you're still in anticipation of the future day where I will one day fully, plagues and everything, like rescue you out of Egypt into the seventh day rest that's eternal. And so that's really what the commands were getting at. So then fast forward to the church, and the seventh day isn't the foretaste of new creation. Jesus is, and the Spirit is, and Jesus has come. He has done the plagues against Egypt and broken the power of the enemy to free his people from the power of sin. We're kind of in that weird phase where we're fleeing Egypt, having been set free, but Pharaoh's breathing down our necks. We haven't quite made it out of Egypt entirely until the final end of things, but we've already been delivered from spiritual Egypt. Like, we've left. And so why do we need to be looking forward to the day that we leave spiritual Egypt? And we have our rest in Jesus and in the Spirit, and all the things that go along with the Sabbath are in Jesus and the Spirit, which we have. And so the idea of keeping the weekly Sabbath as a mandatory, I'm no longer fostering the hope that one day Jesus will rescue me from my sin. I'm no longer fostering the hope that one day through the Spirit I will be connected with God in a much more meaningful way. Like, I already have that. So the Sabbath doesn't stop being important. It's just the weekly remembrance of the thing that's already happened shifts its focus. It's no longer, I need to keep this hope. It's no longer like I'm demonstrating that like what I really want is the seventh day rest. I'm already there. Not fully, but I'm already in that seventh day rest, and anticipating the full seventh day rest when Jesus comes again. But I'm in the thing that the Sabbath was meant to foster a hope and anticipation for. So do I need to have the weekly observances of this passion for something that will happen when it's already happened? No. And that's what Jesus is getting at. He's like, I'm the Sabbath. Don't do a weekly Sabbath, like follow me. Do the things that I do. I'm doing Sabbath things, so do the things that I do. Because in Jesus we find the Sabbath. And so the Sabbath requirement kind of melts away in the traditional sense because we now have the true Sabbath is coming a man in God himself. And then some people will still observe the Sabbath, and that's great. And if we're observing as, oh man, I can't wait until I'm delivered from my sins, okay, well, you've missed the point. If I am observing it as the hope of one day I'll be fully delivered, that's great. Yeah, that's what it's for. I really do feel like Jesus was saying, like, in me, that requirement is fulfilled because in him all requirements are fulfilled. And so I think the need for it ended when Jesus came, not because it's no longer important, but because he is the requirement embodied. But I do see like we're still not there yet, and some people are going to be motivated of like, hey, I want a Sabbath because I want more. I want more and more of this rest and this presence of God and the blessing. There's great things that go along with Sabbath, and a lot of people are going to be really drawn to the Sabbath to anticipate like we're in that state of limbo between like we're out of Egypt, but we're not yet fully out of Egypt, and Pharaoh's still there. And great. Celebrate the Sabbath in that space of like the process has started, but it's not yet done. I can't wait until it's done. Great. Celebrate the Sabbath for that reason. There's going to be some people who celebrate the Sabbath more nostalgically than anticipationally. So it's not, I'm looking forward to the day, but it's like, hey, I'm looking back every week at what's been done, and I want to celebrate what's been done, and I think that's perfectly acceptable too. I do think that a lot of the what the church is doing with the Day of the Lord celebration, the Lord's Day celebrations, are meant to do that. But if we want to do that on Sabbath to commemorate the Sabbath, on the first day to commemorate the resurrection, I don't think there's really importance in which way we go there, because they both have meaning and they're both important and they both are good, and we'll all be led differently, like I said. But really that's kind of what's going on with the Sabbath story. It is this, you were made for this rest, you left the rest. Outside the rest, it's this oppressive, terrible tyranny like Egypt, and so God's giving us this rest from the tyranny, this experience of new creation, one day a week, 1 year every 7 years, and then every 50th year there's these experiences of new creation while we're still in exile. And so it was a looking forward to the day where we would be freed from that exile. And now we are freed in Jesus. We are experiencing him and the Spirit as our Sabbath, and we are still looking forward to the fulfillment of that. We're still looking back at the commemoration of that, but what it looks like to celebrate that is going to look very, very different between different churches, different people, in lots and lots of different ways, and that's good. And that's what builds the diversity of the church. That is a lot of the beauty of the church. So that's a lot to say on Sabbath, but I hope it was helpful, hope it was informative, hope it answers your guys' questions on the Sabbath a little bit. If you guys have more questions, please feel free to put them in the comments or shoot me an email or whatever makes sense for you to do so that I can address more questions here, and really be helping you guys figure out some of those confusing passages in the Bible. Like and subscribe so other people can find these videos, and I hope you all have a great week. Thanks for tuning in.